Good evening, everyone. My name is Gilbert, and on behalf of Vroman's Bookstore, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual event with Jocelyn Ramirez presenting her book, La Vida Verde, Plant-Based Mexican Cooking with Authentic Flavor. We're very excited and grateful that our bookstore can continue to bring authors and their works to our community during this uncertain time. Vroman's Live will continue to host virtual events, and you can learn more about them on our website as well as our social media. Our next event is tomorrow at 6 p.m. with Abby Waxman as she discusses her book, I Was Told It Would Get Easier. For regular updates on upcoming events, please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media. This evening's virtual event will have a Q&A aspect. So to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen over here. If you see a question on the list that you'd like for our author to answer, please click the like button, which is the little up arrow on the side of the question. We'll try to answer as many questions as time will allow. Also, if you'd like to purchase a copy of tonight's book, you can click on the green buy button that's down there at the bottom below the viewer screen. That'll take you to our website where you can continue the checkout process. Vroman's is currently open from 11 to 5 daily with strict health guidelines in place. Visit vromansbookstore.com for more information. Now, our author this evening is Jocelyn Ramirez. She is a plant-based chef, college professor, yoga instructor, and advocate for healthy food access in her community. Jocelyn founded Todo Verde in 2015 with the mission to create delicious and healthy plant-based food inspired by her Mexican and South American roots for the East Side community. In 2017, Jocelyn co-founded Across Our Kitchen Tables, an organization focused on uplifting women of color in the food industry that hosts skill shares and an annual symposium. She currently sits on the Culinary Advisory Board for Food Forward and the Leadership Board for the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jocelyn Ramirez. Jocelyn, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. What an honor. I'm such a huge fan of Ramen's Bookstore, and I was really looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Oh, well, we're incredibly excited to have you here, and obviously, we're bummed that we can't be hosting you in our store, but events with a lot of people still not a thing that won't be happening anytime in the near
Mhm.
future. So I'm glad that we can host you this way, and that we have so many people who are tuned in to watch this. So this is great. Um, like I said, people will be asking questions throughout the evening via the Ask a Question button, but first off, I had been told you a little bit when we were talking beforehand that this book, as a third generation Mexican American here who grew up on a lot of the same stuff that you're talking about. This book is pretty exciting as far as what is possible. And so, what started you down this path of wanting to focus on plant based cooking?
I mean, it really started several years ago, Gilbert, where, I started to look around my immediate family and notice that we were all dealing with these, severe amounts of preventable diseases from a thyroid issue that I was dealing with at the time and still continue to focus on, to my mom dealing with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, my dad dealing with diabetes since I was a kid, and then later suffering from cancer for 3 times now. And so, I started to realize this isn't just an issue with my family, it's an issue with our neighbors, with my cousins, with my tias and my tios, and so many other people that live in low income communities of color. And, as I was on my journey to learn more about vegetarianism and plant based food, I was exploring this concept of decolonizing foodways and attending conversations with my now mentor and friend, Claudia Serrato, who was a huge catalyst for me to think about plant based in a different light. And, after really giving it a lot of thought and thinking through like how it wasn't as difficult as I made it seem in my, in my head, that it was a big possibility for me. And as I continued to explore that, I thought, I want to share this with friends. I want to share it with family and maybe eventually have a business that revolves around plant-based food. And so that was sort of the stepping stones to get to Todo Verde. And all along, I knew that I wanted to create something that felt familiar, because oftentimes when communities of color, a Mexican community thinks about plant-based food or vegan food, they think, oh, well, I have to drive to the west side to get, a quinoa and kale salad at, a fancy place and pay a lot of money for it. But really, thinking that, especially with this, framework of thinking about decolonizing, that we've had the recipes, the ingredients, we've had these staples in our communities that our ancestors have been eating for generations. And how do we get back to that? Even though at this moment we celebrate things with carne asada and pozole with chicken and pork, and all these things that have sort of strayed from that. So Todo Verde is meant to be sort of this in between of just opening the door for people who are currently eating street tacos across Los Angeles and other cities in the United States, to think, well, I love tacos. Can it be plant-based and still really enjoy it? Maybe, and then
Yeah.
that could be a conversation that continues to open more doors.
I got to imagine that because from my perspective as well, like the first thing you think of is like, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much pushback from the like not only the idea of like having to drive far to go get it, but just like this is like, why are you messing with our carne asada? Like
Yeah.
like this is how we live. So
Exactly.
did you get a lot of that from your family? I mean, at least at first.
Yeah. I mean, I think that my family was a little bit more open because of, things like cancer happening
Hmm.
with my dad. And so there was this like idea of like, we want to get better. We need to get better. This is going to keep happening to us. So, which is, actually very unfortunate that it takes somebody getting really sick for folks to be like, okay, let me think about eating better now that we're kind of in a bad place.
Hmm.
So, I like to think about this as like a holistic lifestyle where you eat plant-based just because it's good for you generally, not because it's a Hail Mary trying to, save something at the very end. But yes, I did get some pushback from some family members, mostly my brother at first. As we were gathering for, holidays and celebrations, I remember a few years ago, I was, making a mac and cheese for, I can't remember, it might have been for the Christmas holiday or something like that. And my brother's like, how are you making a mac and cheese if you're vegan? And I was like, oh, it's a plant-based mac and cheese. He was so upset. He was like, how can you always do this? Like, let us have the one thing. And, and to be honest with you, by the end of the night, he had eaten more of that mac and cheese than anyone else. And then the next year he asked me to make it again. So, I do get pushback. And I think the concept of vegan or plant-based, which are two different things, which I can talk a little bit about, but I think that it really scares people and it makes them
Mhm.
feel like this is mine. Like, how could you take this away from me or change it? That's not right. This is our culture. This is our tradition. But it's really opening to, so many more possibilities. It still could be as delicious. And you're learning about so many new ingredients that you've never played with before. And so I think that once people kind of get past that, or if they don't even know that it's plant based, they
Mm.
just eat it and they're like, wow, this is really good. I've had people who have come up to us at an event that Todo Verde has vended or catered, and they're like, how did you make that chicken taco? Like, blah, 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 And I'm like, that was jackfruit. That was not chicken. So that's another way to get people really interested because they may not otherwise even try it.
Like kind of the blind taste test situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, and I think getting people to open up to these possibilities when you're talking about like not only being healthy, but the idea of like of it being a part of a decolonization, where
Hmm.
it can also spark an important conversation about what it meant for our ancestors, pre-colonization. Like you touch on that in definitely in the book, where you talk about like what their diets were based around, and that a lot of the meat and dairy and certain aspects that we kind of think as kind of like a quintessential part of our diet is really wasn't part of it leading up to it, and there was only kind of like special occasions where you would have certain types of meats.
Hmm.
Was that a big part of your figuring it out? Was looking into the history of it and being able to talk to people about that?
Absolutely. I mean, people think if pozole doesn't have chicken or pork, it's not traditional pozole. But if you really look at the history of a dish like pozole, it's been eaten for generations long before colonization ever happened, before we had chicken or pork. So, it was eaten with other, local animals or there is some history out there that I've read where even, human sacrificed humans, which is a really interesting story that my publisher wanted me to take out of the book. And I
Okay,
was
no,
like, fine, okay,
work
I'll
with
leave
book, I
out the one
guess.
about
I
human
guess.
flesh. Yeah, it's a vegan book. Um, but our ancestors ate a very plant forward diet that did eat meat around ceremony. So if there was a very special occasion, there was a sacrifice or something that felt more of like a ceremony, right?
Mhm.
And if you think about indigenous cultures, even here in the United States, there is more of this ceremony around, thank this creature for giving their life for my life. But we have strayed so far where there is no ceremony. It's breakfast, lunch, dinner. Who knows the animal, where they came from, how it, was slaughtered. There's just no question about it. And I think that, if people were back in those times and they themselves killed that animal, there'd be a lot more care for how that process is done. But how did we even get onto this topic? I've strayed. I've strayed
it's
far away.
it's all right. We leave room for that. We leave room
Yeah.
for getting
Oh, we
off
were
topic.
talking about decolonizing.
Yeah, decolonizing.
Yeah.
Yes. Um,
Yeah. And, just kind of bringing it back a little bit is, when I first started learning more about this topic, it really connected me more to like what my grandparents had already been feeding
mm,
us as kids. They migrated here when they were already elders, because most of my tias and my tios had left Zacatecas and brought my grandparents here, and they really brought Mexico here to Canoga Park. And they grew a lot of their own food, and we ate a very plant forward diet. We ate meat here and there, but it was very much plant forward. And they had their own chickens and things like that. So it's just a different experience. I think that there's a lot more respect for
mm,
food when you grow it yourself and you cultivate and you raise animals and things like that. But as I picked up a book like Decolonize Your Diet, which is a huge inspiration to the work that I do with Todo Verde. And as I took these classes with Claudia Cerato and learned more about indigenous veganism with her, I just saw that, we really have come to a point where there's not enough respect for the land, the animals, the plants, everything. And it's time to try to bring that back. Which is why I talk about Todo Verde being a stepping stone, because for some people who in my community depend on a diet like McDonald's and Coca-Cola because frankly they can't afford other things,
mm,
or they just grew up on that and that's what's normal. And it's a matter of getting to a point where a framework like decolonizing makes sense. Somebody who's eating McDonald's and Coca-Cola, who you're like, here's a three sister salad that you can eat every day, that's like this traditional milpa, they're just going to be like, what? I don't eat that. you
right.
know um, and so it's trying to bring it back to some sense of like balance in the land and our humanity and like how we are a part of the ecosystem, um, but also trying to respect where people currently are. So it's a fine balance.
Right. To kind of make it a holistic
Yeah,
approach
definitely.
to it. So as you kind of like what came first for you, was the looking into the history of things, was that always just a part of how you approached learning in general, or as you wanted to kind of explore plant-based cooking, did the history then come into it, like as part of it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both.
Mm,
I think I definitely, as I became more immersed in like wanting to try more ingredients and learn more about recipes, part of that history also came from my grandmother before she passed, like really sitting down with her and learning, like, how she learned these recipes, how far down in the lineage, like her family had been making them, just really trying to get like as much information as possible because my grandmother lived to be 96 years old. She was fairly healthy, mostly, passed from old age. My grandfather was 2 months shy of being 100.
wow.
Um, and so, when I look at my tias and my tios who are their kids, I just, who mostly they migrated here at an earlier age. I am afraid for their health. I'm not sure if they're going to make it 2 months shy of 100. So it's really learning about like that history of how they lived, back in Mexico, how they ate, and how things have changed now. And that's a big part of the knowledge that we need to resurface.
Hmm.
And then with that, if you're interested in that, then getting more informed on ingredients and how they have been used and how they can transform to be, used in a dish that maybe you didn't think it could work, but it can, and people have been doing it for years. Even thinking about the history of amaranth is really interesting. It's a superfood ingredient that was mostly used in ceremony, and is highly nutritious. And when colonization happened, that was one ingredient that was essentially banned, and people couldn't use it because it was attached to the ceremony. And with colonization, obviously they were trying to bring in this religion and get people to stop doing the traditional things that they had been doing. And so amaranth became an ingredient that could not be eaten or grown. And so there's a big disconnect there. And some people don't even know like what you would use amaranth for anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be one of those people, I think. um, so that does make sense to me. And also, shout out to your grandparents being from Zacatecas, as three
Yeah.
fourths, three fourths of my grandparents also from Zacatecas, and my
Yes, que viva Zacatecas.
so my grandpa used to grow stuff in our backyard. He lived in the back house, and
Hmm.
so he lived to be 94. So,
Wow.
I definitely know that idea of like seeing your aunts and uncles and being like, there's something happened, something changed in what we were doing
Hmm.
along the way. Um, so as you worked your way into opening Todo Verde, was a cookbook always part of the idea eventually, or did that just kind of happen and be like, what, we should collect all these?
Yeah. I mean, it was always a dream, I've always been really passionate about food. Prior to being plant-based, I actually considered myself to be one of these foodies who followed around, anything that Jonathan Gold wrote about in Los Angeles. I was there eating
Yes,
it like shortly
yes.
after. Um, so that was me. I ate a little bit of everything. And, as I started to play more with these plant-based ingredients and then really step into this, like, this lifestyle saying like, this is what I want to do. I started playing with these recipes that were natural to me, the ones that I grew up eating that my abuelita had taught us how to make. And just writing them down and thinking, oh, it would be great one day to write a cookbook. I have it in a note somewhere. And then, with the work that I had been doing with Dolo Verde, very fortunately was approached by a publisher to write this book. And, I took a step back, like, whoa, okay, I guess the universe is telling me that it's time to do it. But, in addition to just wanting to put these recipes out there because they're my family recipes and it's important for us to document these stories, it's important for us as people of color to also have space in this category of becoming authors and being a part of bookstores like Vroman's and others across the nation. That's definitely important. The other part of it for me was about legacy because, I own this small business here in Los Angeles and I cater several events and we do pop-ups here and there and people love our food. But it's not enough. If I really want to make a shift, It's being able to have somebody in Oklahoma open my book and make some jackfruit in their home kitchen. That's really for me the legacy. I can go out of business tomorrow. I can be gone tomorrow. But the book lives on, and it allows people to make these recipes that I have tried to put together really simply, so that it just feels like it's not this chore or really difficult task to put together something that could be really delicious.
Yeah, the idea that that it's something that you could leave behind for everybody, that gives a voice to communities like ours and communities of color. And community, it seems to be, is essential to not only your mission, but also kind of what's happening right now in general, like trying to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we take care of each other. Let's first figure out how we can help each other before we move beyond that. And I noticed how everything that you all in the book, which by the way also right here,
Yay.
in the book, you kind of intro each recipe with a paragraph or two that kind of connects it to your life, or the community, the local community that you grew up in, or just kind of the history, or a little bit of all of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that seemed like it was something that was very clearly a very important point for you to make as you went through it. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of decision to make sure that was happening?
And honestly, Gilbert, part of it was that, when I was first approached by my publisher to write this book, obviously I went online and I looked to see what other publishers or what other authors are out there who have written a plant-based Mexican cookbook. And, to be honest, most of them were not Mexican.
Mm,
And so they can't share these same stories because they didn't live the culture. I feel like I am this is my life in pages. And I thought that it's important to, like I said, take up space and to be able to share a story that someone in another place can pick up and say, that's what my grandparents used to do, or that's the way I grew up.
mm.
And to feel this like reciprocity and like understanding. And so many people have been DMing me and messaging me and emailing me about that. And I think that that's really important. We don't have enough representation of people of color in media, period. And we just need to really change the script a little bit and to hold space for people in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that you know being I've worked in bookstores for like almost 20 years now, and seeing as we try and make the progress that we can. All It's
Mm-hmm.
slow, clearly, but yeah, it's a very important aspect that I hope can continue, because reading those little intros, I mean, there was, as you talked about, having, your grandparents that had, your brother had a favorite thing and you had a favorite thing, and they would make
Yeah.
sure to prepare, that for you, and having, those kind of that nostalgia of
Mm-hmm.
that those type of foods bring up, and how connected that was really amazing. And I thank you for it, because it made me definitely feel more connected and more excited about trying to, you know, uh, experiment with things like this, because I'm
Yeah.
still, I'm still on the, still working my way, and wanting to kind of be healthier. And that's something that you talk about in here, where you say that you're not trying to get people to be full on, vegan all the time, but at least you want to give them
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to try it out here and there, so that they're not going to necessarily turn down, their, you know, Abuela's, dish when they when they go there. They're still going to be able to eat it, but it
Yeah.
just may not be all the time. That's a really important aspect, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, many years ago when I was already, quote unquote plant-based, and there was a family gathering, and my tia had brought a queso from Zacatecas that my other tia had made. She has her own farm, her own
Mm.
cows. She milked the cows. She made the cheese. They came back to the US with it, and they were making gorditas. And they're like, oh, you can't eat the gorditas because they have cheese. And I was like, I will make an exception for that cheese because that is like, you know, it's a very special cheese that I grew up eating. I know that that was made with a lot of love and care. I'm not like picking up cacique at Northgate, you know. It's a very different experience. Um, and so yes, like, this book is not meant to be like, hey, this is the only way that you're supposed to eat from now on, and ditch all the other things that you love to eat. I think that, especially as people are transitioning and thinking more about plant-based food, it's important to create a balance, and to kind of do things in phases. I went vegetarian first, and then slowly started to leave things out of my shopping cart. And, little by little you adjust. But other people do the thing where it's like New Year's Day, I'm going vegan, cold turkey, right?
Yeah.
Pun intended or unintended. And that has a lower likelihood of success because it's like you can't just flip a switch off. There's certain things that people really love the flavor of, and so I think it's important to explore new recipes, adjust them. Somebody might make the queso fresco recipe in this book, and they might say, I want it to be a little bit more like this or that. This is the way that my family made it,
Mm.
right? So it's like, awesome, you have a foundation, and now you can do whatever you want with that recipe. It can become your recipe, your new family recipe. And so I highly encourage people to just adjust as much as possible, and to really be open-minded, and to think about how this not only impacts the way that they feel in their own body, but what the implications are in a very positive way to the environment, to the ecosystem, to the animals, and everything around us, in such a positive way. And and not think, well, I have to either fall into this bucket, or if I eat that gordita made with the cheese from Zacatecas, I ruined everything. It's not that. Um, it's you have to kind of be able to be a little bit more relaxed as needed. And one thing that I did want to mention is, I think that plant-based and vegan are oftentimes used interchangeably.
Mm,
And
yeah.
plant-based, I wanted to make sure that this book was titled plant-based, and that anything in the book that talks about that is specifically the term plant-based versus vegan, because plant-based means that you mostly eat a plant-based diet, but sometimes may stray, right?
Mm.
Sometimes may eat that queso from Zacatecas. Sometimes may eat, something that isn't within the box that veganism creates. And then vegan is somebody who has chosen to completely eliminate any animal product from not just their plate, but also their products, the clothing that they wear, the shoes that they wear. So it's really across all areas of that person's life where animals are not used in any way. And so, the reason that I wanted it to say plant-based is because I understand that veganism can be too strict for some people when they're just starting. And I wanted something to feel like it was a little bit more open, like, yeah, you may make a couple of these recipes a week, and then maybe another day you eat something else. It's okay, but you're trying. That's the most important part, is that there's this effort, this conscious effort to create a shift, even if that means that you're not making these recipes 7 days a week, right? That
Right.
it's an incremental effort.
And that's, I feel it feels much more encouraging to me. And I think that's because it also seems daunting sometimes when you're like, oh man, I got to make this full change, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm not going to be having anything. So the idea where it's an important distinction to make, and I'm glad you're able to kind of go into the nuance of it, so that everybody,
Yeah.
and I think that fits with your book, and kind of and just your general community mission of kind of welcoming people into the idea of shifting, and not just flipping the switch, as you say.
Yeah.
And I do, and I also appreciate the idea of being able to adapt it to your own kind of like you said, your family did it that way, other families do it other ways, and you always see the difference in there because
Hmm.
Lord knows.
And that even applies to like different cultural foods. So I recently did a food demonstration that's going to be a part of Grand Park's 4th of July celebration.
Ooh.
And I did the jackfruit carnitas mostly because I understand that there's so many different cultures that we have here within Los Angeles. And
Mm-hmm.
a dish like jackfruit is so versatile. The way that I prepare it in this book is obviously, carnitas al pastor, it's very Mexican inspired,
Mm-hmm.
but that dish could be easily transformed to become a Filipino dish, to become a Chinese dish, to become a Salvadorian dish, whatever it may be. And so, that's again another foundation that I wanted to create where people feel like, yeah, I do love Mexican food, but now that I know how to make jackfruit because of this book, I can go on to make my own cultural food using this new ingredient that now I understand how to prepare.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of another layer too.
That's awesome. That's great. That's an aspect that I hadn't thought of. But like I knew you, given your own background, there was the Mexican and the Ecuadorian, and growing up
Mm-hmm.
here. But the idea, like, yeah, once you know how to do it, then you can. It is the horizons are very open to figure
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
um, now, this book obviously it came out at a very strange time for a book to be released. In that like we had mentioned at the top, you were supposed to be in store. We were, we had a whole lineup of events, and your book was one of them. And then COVID-19 happened, and everything got called off. Um, Yet you're still out here being able to talk about it. I mean, obviously, I would imagine that was a concern of yours as as it happened, and what kind of reaction did you end up getting, and were you surprised by it?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, when I saw things starting to go into lockdown mode and all our events started to kind of fall apart right before our eyes in March, I knew that, the book's launch date was April 14th. So I just felt this sinking feeling of like all this work is kind of down the drain, but obviously for important reasons. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt really devastating, that like I mentioned to you earlier, I thought, okay, that's it. The book's going to be a flop. Like I'll try my best, but we're not going to be out there promoting it in the ways that we had hoped to do that. There was going to be travel and a book tour and all these things, and it just all didn't work out. Um, and, shortly before the launch date, I kept promoting it on our social media here and there. But then as people who had pre-ordered the book started to receive the book on the launch day, and we got just like this enormous amount of love on social media. Everybody was posting their book. Everybody was so excited about it. It was, for me, really unexpected. I think that if the book would have been launched just 2 weeks prior, it maybe would have been as devastating as I had thought, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody was so consumed with what is this coronavirus and how do we get it, and all the news. But it came out just in a time where we were kind of accepting a little bit more, like, yes, this is
Mm-hmm.
terrible, but we're stuck at home. This is the new reality for us. And people were also eager to, consume other information aside from coronavirus. They wanted to be happy and excited about
Right.
something. And they are already cooking at home more than ever before. And so here are these new plant-based recipes. And the layer on top of that is that, people, with who are thinking about coronavirus are thinking, how can I become immune and like be healthier in a time where
Right.
there's this crazy respiratory disease that's affecting our immunity? And so plant-based is an option that people were highly considering, continuing to highly consider. And here's this plant-based book that came out just in time. So it was completely unexpected, super well embraced. My publishers are also kind of shocked by it, to be honest with you. They're like, I just can't believe the book's doing this well, but congratulations. All in all, it's been a wild ride, but definitely an interesting one.
I'm very happy to hear that, and that's yeah, that's the good kind of surprise that you want from for both you
Yeah.
and your publisher, I would imagine, as well. Um, Well, I think we're going to start looking at some of these questions from the audience. So, as a reminder to everybody that's watching, you can see that down there at the bottom of the screen, it says "Ask a Question." You can click on that. You can enter your question, and then we'll see if we can get to that. And you can also click on the little arrow like button on the side, and that will give you a chance to hit the question that's a little bit higher up. This first question is from Laurel. She says, I am a long-time plant-based eater and cook, and I also avoid all salt, oil, and sugar, especially oil. I really want to be able to cook authentic plant-based Mexican food, and I hope Chef Ramirez can give suggestions about how to do it without oil. That seems
Yeah.
like a
I
tall
mean,
order, but yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it is a little tough for an ingredient, for example, like jackfruit, which I have cooked without oil. We've done a couple of private chef and catering events where our clients have requested no oil. And so something like a jackfruit is a little bit tougher to recreate in the way that we typically make it, which is crisped in a little bit of oil. But there's so
Mm,
many other dishes in here that you can prepare that don't need the oil. It may be included in there as an ingredient, but it doesn't necessarily need it. The ceviche can still be made without oil. There's tons of salads, there's a pozole, there's a lot of things in there that can definitely be recreated. And it's just a matter of adding enough of the like moisture. And this is now getting into like
right.
technicalities of cooking, right?
I'm sure some people, yeah,
Where
I'm
you
sure
don't
some
want,
people want that.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, if you're cooking something like I did with the jackfruit that was cooked without oil, is that I, had it in a pan and I was trying to kind of brown it and sear it, but I was adding a little bit of vegetable broth at a time so it wouldn't stew, but it could create a little bit of moisture that it needed without drying out. So it's definitely this balance, and something like an orange, like a sweet fruit, like an orange can help create some of that browning as well if you're trying to sear something without oil because of the sugars in
Mm,
it. So it'll not only like bring flavor to the dish, but the sugars will help the browning process. But I know that you're trying to leave out sugar. So I don't know if that's like leaving out fruit completely or just any processed sugars. But if you are still eating fruit, then that could be an ingredient that can be used to add a little bit of extra flavor to the dish.
okay. Hopefully that helps Laurel in her quest. Okay, we have a question from, let's see, Sarah Rudd. She asked, what are your favorite cities in Mexico you like to visit for inspiration or just inspiration in general, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite cities, I've been to a lot of different places, everywhere from like Baja to, right at the border, um, to Mexico City and Zacatecas and Guadalajara. For whatever reason, my parents went often to Yucatan. So
Mm,
I, spent a lot of time growing up in Cancun, in that general like peninsula area. And I really, really love that area because the food is so unique to that specific region,
right,
where you're cooking things that are, a salsa with habanero versus like, where my family's from, where we use like a chile de árbol. So it's definitely a different like brightness in the food. Because it is like an ocean, it's surrounded by ocean, whereas where my mom is from in Zacatecas, there's no ocean around.
right.
She actually didn't see an ocean until she came to Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Um, so, but I think aside from like that whole like Yucatan, Quintana Roo area, like who does not love Mexico City? You know,
Mm,
um, just it's one of the greatest cities. I think if you're just looking for, so many varieties of food, it's really like a cultural hub for Mexico that I really love. And I was supposed to go um, sometime around this year,
Uh,
and even thinking about like what that looks like for a book tour. But obviously that's not going to happen. So hopefully I'll make it back to Mexico City at some point soon.
yeah, that would be, I'm sure, amazing. And I've never been, so I can imagine the just all the different aspects that converge there. It's got to be something to be
Hmm.
seen. Um, we have another question here from, let's see, give me one second as I scroll through these. We have another question. It says that they love Amaranth and they have their book on order, but they don't have it quite yet. But they do have Amaranth, and asking if you could suggest a way for them to use it, which I would also like to hear because I am not familiar
Yeah.
with Amaranth. So, what are the best ways to use that?
So amaranth are these little seeds that oftentimes are used popped, but sometimes you can ground it and use it as sort of like a flour substitute, although it does need to be mixed with other ingredients because the flavor could be really earthy.
Mm.
In fact, a few years ago, another situation where I'm, using my family as guinea pigs, I made a pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving and I used mostly amaranth for the crust, and my brother was like, "Why'd you bring us this? It's like it's trash. No one's gonna eat this," because it just tasted like kind of like a dirt, to be honest with you.
Wow,
It
wow.
had a very earthy flavor because I used just so much of it. So there's a delicate balance with amaranth that you need to play with. But I think the easiest way to work with amaranth is to pop it, similar to popcorn. And it's much smaller, and it will be this slightly crunchy texture. And I actually had it in a dessert recipe in the book, but it didn't make the cut for this book. It was sweetened pumpkin that I stewed in like a piloncillo, and then it was topped with popped amaranth. But popped amaranth could be added to anything. You can, cut up some fruit in the morning and sprinkle it with popped amaranth over the top for a little bit of
Uh,
crunch.
is Amaranth easy to get hold of? As this is just my follow up question to it.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, I mean, they sell it at Whole Foods now. So
Oh
it's
wow.
typically available at health food stores. I'm sure you can buy it online. I'm not sure how often you can find it at a Mexican grocery store, which is interesting, right?
Hmm.
Because again, the separation of like not a lot of people use amaranth nowadays, but it was an ingredient that was used so much by ancestors that it's sad to see how it's not used. And it's a small seed, about the size of a chia seed when it's popped.
Huh.
But chia has survived. Like a lot of people still use chia in our community, but for todo verde, I include chia seeds in all of our agua fresca, just because it's such a nutritious ingredient and it also provides a really nice texture in those drinks.
And as a follow up to my follow up, Francis here had asked. I'm assuming Francis is here locally in the Los Angeles area, and asking if you have any recommendations for stores to pick up the ingredients that you use
Yeah.
in this book.
So, yeah, the thing with somebody who's going plant based, I find that there's a few stores that I have to go to. It's very rare that I go to one store and I'm
Mm.
able to pick everything up, unless it is kind of like a Whole Foods. There is, if you're in Los Angeles, there's a small store in East LA called Hierbas de Mexico, or Herbs of Mexico,
Mm.
and they do have a lot of ingredients from chia seeds to amaranth to herbs and different things that you can pick up. And then, I go to other health food stores like one in South Pass called Grassroots.
Mm.
It's a little hidden health food store. And then I also shop at Trader Joe's and sometimes at Mexican grocery stores when I need like particular chiles. So, for this book, I find that there are a few places I have to go to. The book, however, if you do have it in front of you, has a list of ingredient sources in the back of the book, and most of them are online. So, if you
Uh,
live in an area other than Los Angeles, which is a predominant, a very strong Latino community, maybe you live in a neighborhood where that you don't have a lot of Mexican grocery stores, you can look up some of these stores online and be able to get some of the ingredients shipped to you. And hopefully shipping is better. When the book came out, people were like, yeah, I see that such and such place sells it, but they're not shipping right now because of COVID or they're maxed
right.
out. But I think that people have sort of started to find the balance with shipping again. So I'm hoping that it's not as difficult to get some of the ingredients.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully, I would imagine definitely
Yeah.
places are changing and adapting. So hopefully you're
Mm-hmm.
able to get that. I have a question here from Sen. She said, growing up, my sister complained about spicy food. We teased her about this. What kind of Mexican are you? Turns out she's allergic to capsaicin. So,
Oh.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so she said, "Are bad." Now the
Yeah.
problem is making dishes that have flavor but won't give her a rash. Chilies feature in so many of the Mexican recipes that she comes across. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. Being
Mm-hmm.
allergic to capsaicin, I mean, that's what creates the fiery heat in any of the chiles that you find. And so not using chiles is really tough. I use chiles a lot in my dishes. But it is possible. There are even, things like bell pepper, which I don't think has any capsaicin because it's not a spicy pepper. So you could use peppers that still give a little bit of that flavor of a chile, but are not spicy. I actually, back here on my dresser, I'm reading a book called The Great Chile Book. And
Hmm.
it's literally talking about all the different chiles one by one and their levels of heat. And some of them are at zero. They're mostly there as a flavor component, but they don't
Right.
have any heat or fieriness to them. But aside from that, I would go really heavy on other super flavorful umami ingredients. If she's not allergic to like a mushroom powder, dried mushrooms, like adding things like that, adding lots of herbs like cilantro and epazote, oregano, either raw or fresh oregano or dried, things like that that can still create a really delicious dish, but that just don't have the chile to them.
Hmm.
So I mean, there's things in here like, for example, like the pipianes that call specifically for chiles, like that's kind of the heart of that dish. But you could still create something that was like toasted pepitas with fire roasted tomatoes that would still taste really delicious and add a bunch of these like herbs and things to even bring the flavor profile to a higher point. In that case, the pipián rojo, I would do those fire roasted tomatoes, toasted pepitas, and I would add some mushroom powder and just give it like as
Hmm.
much of a full flavored dish as possible, although it's slightly different from the actual recipe itself.
Oh, okay. That seems helpful, and hopefully they'll be able to help out her sister there. We have time for one or two more. Sorry. This is from Rachel. She asks, "Do you have a go-to meal that you've included in the book, like a meal that's a staple for you?"
I really love the ceviche, which is made with heart of palm. For me, it's been a go-to for a very long time. In fact, there was a point where I was like, I can't eat it anymore, but I love it, because I was just eating it all the time and we make it so much for Todo Verde. But that dish is really special because, my family, we ate a lot of seafood growing up. And like I mentioned, my mom didn't see an ocean until she migrated here. But they just, made ceviche fairly often. That was like a new tradition for my family, right? There wasn't like an
Right.
old tradition that passed down through generations. Um, and so that was something that was hard for me to let go of. And so whenever I get that craving of, I want something that's light, fresh, that feels like seafood, the heart of palm really plays a nice role in that dish.
That is undoubtedly one of the ones that I am most excited about
Yeah.
in the
And
books.
it's so easy.
I
Yeah.
know. I was looking at the ingredients and just the process, and I was like, "Oh, that doesn't seem like it would be that much."
Yeah.
Because I'm not, I'm not known for my cooking acumen, so I'm looking for the ones that have the less steps in it. We're getting close to wrapping up here. And I wanted to ask, where is where for todo verde? I know you're probably not catering as much right now, but as it builds back up, um, is there a restaurant or something like that in the future that we could look forward to? Because obviously it's something that we'd want to all try.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And like right now, there's been a lot of shifts happening because of COVID. So we haven't been catering like we normally do. And we are, a vendor at LA Smorgasburg, which is also currently
Mm,
closed due to COVID with no idea in sight of when it will come back. And so it's been a big shift. And right now, the pivot has been to offer online cooking classes, going through the recipes that are in the book and having this interaction with me where you're cooking along with me essentially. And you can pan the camera over and say, is this looking right? Does it
oh
need this
wow.
or that? And I can give you feedback. So I've been doing that publicly. We have these public cooking classes, but also private ones where if it's someone's birthday and they want to celebrate virtually with friends and family in different households, there's still this kind of fun interaction happening with the private cooking class with friends or family.
Well,
And
that's cool.
have been mostly like shifting digitally. And Gilbert, what's crazy is like I was super, super close to signing a lease in mid-March.
Oh,
Um,
whoa.
yeah, and I met with the owners of the property and was like, I have to see how this plays out because I would spend a serious amount of money building out a restaurant, taking out loans and things like that to make it work, and to not really know how COVID would play out, or if we're going into a recession, or even worse
Right.
than that, if people will have discretionary income to pay for food outside of home at the moment. I'm just not sure. And so, I'm just right now playing it safe and taking it one day at a time. And our goal is by next month to be making some meal kits. So it would be
Uh,
delivery and pickup. But we're slowly getting there. We're going to get back to it next month.
oh well, I mean that's exciting in and of itself.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, that close to signing a lease
Yeah.
mid-March. That
This
is,
close.
whew, yeah.
Yeah. Imagine. Yeah. What that
Yeah,
looks like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, Jocelyn, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us here, and it was I had a great time talking to you, and it was so exciting and informative for me, and I hope for everybody here that was a part of it.
Yeah. Thank you. It was so much fun talking to you too. Thank you so much for having me in this virtual space. I'm glad it still worked out.
Yeah, we are as well. So everybody who's watching right now, thank you for attending. Please make sure to purchase the book. La Vida Verde is available at Vroman's. If
Yes.
you click down here, there it is.
Yeah.
It says right there, there's a buy button. You can click on that. We are open currently for curbside pickup. Those that usually takes about 2 days to process that order, just because we have so many coming in, and we have a small crew because of the health guidelines that we have. But like I said, we are also open from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily with strict health guidelines in place. So you can go to romansbookstore.com to see that, and as well as see our other virtual events. You can also start following us here on Crowdcast, as our events will continue to be virtual. And then just make sure that you just, as long as you can help Romans and keep supporting us, we'd very much appreciate it. And so we can keep bringing you great events like this. So Jocelyn, once again, thank you so much for being a part of this. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Everybody be
All right,
safe out there.
definitely. All right, have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, bye
Thank you,
bye.
Gilbert.